Hi, my name is Kevin and I collect old irons. The world of sad irons used in advertising is a rather small niche in the history of old irons, but this group is widely collected and some examples can bring surprising amounts of money. So here goes. So let's take a look at old irons as advertisements. And here I mean physical items, not advertisements on paper. By and large, the items that we'll be talking about here were giveaways once upon a time, much as in a more recent time there were advertisements on beer can openers or matchbooks, or in a more recent day, the present, on keychains or fridge magnets. Let me tell you how I got started on this line of study, and that is through the tailor weights. The tailors, as we know, ironed, and we've seen some of the goose irons that they used, but more importantly, they made clothes. If you were a businessman in the 1800s, you would very likely personally know the tailor who made your coat, your shirt, your pants, your vests. You would go into the tailor, pick out the fabric, be measured, and a week or two later you'd pick up your suit. Tailors did a lot of their advertising through trade cards, and there may be more trade cards for tailors than most anything else. But those advertising to the tailors were selling the raw cloth that the tailors would use. A tailor would have books of what were called trimmings. These were much like the sample cards that we see today in paint stores. The fabric makers wanted to get these trimming books to the tailors, so the tailors would then use these particular samples in showing to their customers. These weights, provided to the tailor for no cost, I am sure, advertised the companies that made or sold the cloth. Here are some very typical tailor weights made of metal. This one says L. Fox Sons Tailor Supplies, 69 4th Avenue, New York. As I did in the previous video, I will use a 4-inch piece of wood for scale for these photos that come from my own collection. This one reads Dilhoft Myers & Company, Tailor Trimmings, Cincinnati. And here, Cumner Jones Company, Chicago. Variants of this one come from several cities and in several sizes. But here's an idea. Why not have your weights in the shape of a tailor's goose iron? I just found something really interesting on eBay that I want to show to you. This is a political cartoon from 1849 published in the English satirical magazine Punch. But let me give the backstory. Prince Albert, husband and consort to Queen Victoria, had a tailor, and between he and the tailor they decided to design a new uniform for the British Army, which then Prince Albert presented to court. As far as I know, there is no surviving evidence of the uniform itself, perhaps with good reason. But there is this cartoon with our tailor, book of tailor patterns in hand, armed with his scissors and astride a war goose iron, leading the army to battle. The text below reads, "The tailor's goose, terror of the army." I think there was a lot of laughter here at poor Albert's expense. As I'm prone to tell my students, I don't make these up, from whole cloth or otherwise. I only have a couple of these tailor goose weights. They generally go for $100 to $200 each, but judging by the half dozen or so that I see at every sad iron auction, there must be dozens of different types and maybe even 100. Let's look at a couple. This one reads the Max O. Wertheim Tailor's Trimmings, Cleveland. This reads John L. Bobo and Company, Tailor's Trimmings, Chicago. Some are a little bigger. Here is a tailor iron on a lucky horseshoe that reads Charles Cockshott and Company. And here is something a little unusual. This reads L. Simonson, Tailor Trimmings, Los Angeles, and shows a Rose natural gas tailor iron. And here is the Rose natural gas tailor iron. These come in various configurations. Some have the outlet here, the natural gas outlet to the front or the rear. Fairly common. This one has the stand. Even with the stand, you might be able to buy the pair for $40 or $60, which is a whole lot less than it might cost you to buy the equivalent tailor weight. I paid $140 for this one. By far the most famous advertising on small irons are on very tiny Mrs. Potts cold handle sat irons. I have one here in its original box. This is presumably a giveaway at the 1876 Centennial Exhibition, and what this is a very small iron, fully functional. The handle comes off, the handle goes back on, and on the bottom this one reads Enterprise Manufacturing Company, Philadelphia. There are variations. This one says American Machine Company, and probably dates to a few years after the Centennial Fair. I understand that there are other examples with other markings, maybe to a specific distributor or so forth, and there are versions with no markings at all. All of these are quite rare and might have values of $500 or more. There are several groups of flat iron advertisers. Let's take a look at two of these. The first is a group of mid-sized flat irons that have rather minimal text. This one has one word, Rarical, and measures 2 3/8 inches. These Rarical irons are quite common. I have had numerous opportunities to buy one of these and have passed on them because they're out of my collecting range. And I again have to thank Jim Geisert for the photos for these and other irons that we'll be seeing shortly. Judy Pulitzer searched unsuccessfully for where the word rarical came from or what it meant, but Jim has provided this example, which includes the original paper advertisement pasted to the bottom, which says Rarical tablets, effective, tolerant iron calcium therapy. Here is another of these flat iron advertisers. This one has a round back and measures 3 1/4 inch, marked Ferteron, and on the other side Ferrobifactin. And here is another marked Ferrance, trademark, for iron deficiency anemia. And by the way, the trademark there means that this must be American. So these are drug advertisements in their day. Iron deficiency, sat iron, you can make the connection. There's another interesting group of flat iron advertisers. These are oftentimes known as the monopoly style advertisements. They are irons very much like the flat iron piece on the monopoly board, but measure 5/8 of an inch. That is twice the size of the monopoly piece, but 5/8 of an inch, let's keep in mind, is barely more than half an inch. These are very small. Here are 3 of the irons from the top view. These photos again provided to me by Jim Geisert, who has been a great help in this video. And here these are from the bottom. This advertises the White Swan laundry, here the White Star laundry, and the third, the Parisian steam laundry. These are quite small. They do not have room for city names, and my guess is that these were bought wholesale by the gross for very little money and handed out to customers. So what is the story on these? The story begins when one of the Dowse brothers, who published the National Laundry Journal out of Chicago, saw a demonstration of a new linotype machine for molding metal typeface at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair and bought one of the machines, originally for making printer's type for the journal, but then adapted this to also make the small collar buttons used in men's shirts of the time. And from there to making the little prizes included in the Cracker Jack boxes, circa 1920s. You might note a little iron in the lower left corner. Hey, here also are the shoe, battleship, car, and top hat. the contract later developed to make the tokens for the Monopoly board game. Along the way, let us be reminded that these brothers started by being publishers of the National Laundry Journal, and from there they had the lists of all the laundry businesses hither and yon, and offered to sell these small irons as advertising pieces individually to laundries in the United States and overseas. These little laundry advertisers seem to date from the latest 1800s to early 1900s. My guess is that the laundry advertisers predate, probably by a decade or more, the smaller Cracker Jack prizes. There are dozens, again maybe 100 different company names on these, and these has values of several $100s per 5/8 inch little iron. Go figure. There is another group of advertising irons associated with the Dover Manufacturing Company. As we said in a previous video, the asbestos irons were manufactured for some 40 years without much in the way of changes, but the Dover irons occurred in a variety of sizes with a variety of markings, and some of these have advertising associated with companies not directly related to the iron itself. I will show two examples here, but as with icebergs, what you see here is merely the tip of the subject, and these also come from the Geisert collection. This is a fairly ordinary, mid-sized, 3.5 inch long Dover iron with an advertisement on both sides for the Acme stores, which is a group of stores that were in business in the Akron, Ohio region. The shoe actually says A Besto rather than Dover as would be typical, and that's a bit of an anomaly. The iron itself is rare. Jim says this is the only one he's ever seen. This is not illustrated in the Pulitzer books. Here is another Dover iron, length 4 1/8 inch, that advertises Detmar woolen products and serves as a pincushion. These are quite common. A similar iron at one of the Dave Irons auctions recently sold for $30. There are other groups of sad iron advertisers, but let's move to something completely different. This is a tobacco cutter, probably used at the grocery, a convenience in case you need to cut your own plug of chewing tobacco, presumably of the Flat Iron Plug brand. I have an advertisement as well. Flatiron Chew was a product of the Scott and Dillon Company of Detroit, which was a major player in the chewing tobacco scene in the 1880s to early 1900s. The Flatiron Plug appears to have been a fairly minor brand, but I've seen various imaginative advertisements for this. And a reminder of the Flatiron logo on the box of elastic starch. We've seen this box before. We actually used this starch when we did the Let's Go fluting videos some while ago. And there's a lot of other elastic iron products. Here is an elastic iron book with hints for the laundry. And here is the elastic starch crate in which those boxes of starch would be mailed or shipped to the merchants. These are fairly common. They come in different sizes. Worth well, I paid a couple $100 from this at a antique shop in southern Maine. This one is particularly nice. It's got nice markings all the way around, and it also has a lid, which you don't very often see. There also is an interesting picture of a pretty lady on the inside of the cover of the box. And here is another smaller wooden commercial shipping crate for a different brand of starch. This is in excellent condition. I'll show you the beautiful markings on both sides. It includes this nice piece on the top that has the pasted on paper with all the particulars about the companies and so forth. And this also has on one end this just gorgeous illustration of a bunch of ladies doing the ironing, presumably with this starch. Very pretty piece. I have bought this from eBay for about $50–60, and I've seen a couple of antique shops since then for not as good of markings, but for not as much money. Not overly expensive. And thank you again for keeping up with us on this series. Please do, if you have not already, Subscribe, leave a comment, give a thumbs up, and we will see you again.